Something happened in Cleveland this week that nobody saw coming. A quarterback battle that was supposed to stretch through the summer ended in one brutal afternoon. Not with a quiet decision behind closed doors, not with a slow, gradual shift over time. No, this was a public execution on the practice field. In front of teammates, coaches, support staff, and front office executives, Shedeur Sanders didn't just outperform Dylan Gabriel. He humiliated him. He took his job, and he did it with such precision, such authority, that the entire organization felt it shift. Coaches fell silent. Players stared. And one brutal interception later, the Browns knew who their real quarterback was. It wasn't a third-round pick. It wasn't the safe choice. It was the fifth-round rookie who just flipped the entire script and possibly the franchise's future. This is the story of how Shedeur Sanders didn't earn the job he took it, forcefully, undeniably, and in full view of everyone present. From the very first snap, it didn't feel like a quarterback competition. It felt like a takeover. When Shedeur Sanders stepped under center at Wednesday's padded practice, the entire vibe on the Browns' practice field shifted, not gradually, but instantly. We're talking about a rookie quarterback with no hype machine behind him, no guaranteed reps, no promises from the coaching staff. And yet, witnesses say the second he touched the ball, everyone snapped to attention. His first throw? On time, in rhythm, perfectly placed. His second? Even sharper. By the end of his first series, players on the sidelines, veterans, rookies, specialists were already murmuring. This wasn't some encouraging flash of potential from a late-round pick. This was control, command, presence. Observers inside the facility say Sanders moved like a veteran in his prime calm in the pocket, fast on reads, decisive with every motion. And here's what's even crazier. He wasn't just hitting passes. He was manipulating the defense. Shifting protections, changing plays at the line. He ran the offense like it belonged to him. And the energy? It was contagious. Receivers began locking in sharper. Footwork tightened. Huddle communication got crisp. Every snap with Shadur felt like a live game rep, and the defense, which had been dominating earlier camp sessions, suddenly looked hesitant, confused. It was that precise. Sources say the Browns' coaching staff watched from the sideline in stunned silence, not jumping in, not correcting, just watching, holding clipboards, but saying nothing. He was that locked in, that uncoachable in the best way possible. Midway through the first team period, Sanders uncorked a 25-yard sideline throw on 3rd and long, a throw that never should have worked. But it did. Two defenders draped a receiver, and somehow the ball still hit him in stride, inches from the boundary, leaving the DBs looking at each other like they'd just seen a ghost. That moment? That was the snap of realization. One team source put it bluntly, "We've been talking about quarterback of the future? That wasn't the future, that was right now." And Sanders wasn't slowing down. Over the next series, he strung together 7 straight completions against the first-string defense, including a 40-yard bullet on a deep dig that cut through triple coverage. Not forced, not reckless. Just perfectly executed. Like he'd already run the play 100 times. And then, just to prove it wasn't a breakout fluke, he followed with a no-huddle series that looked like something out of prime Aaron Rodgers tape-adjusting routes post-snap, using pump fakes to free safeties, hitting tight window throws on the run with zero wasted motion. The offensive rhythm was never better all camp. And for the first time, receivers started looking animated. Running backs were clapping after solid pickups. Offensive linemen began chest bumping after completions. It felt like a unit. It felt like a leader had stepped in. Now here's what makes this stretch unforgettable. He didn't miss. Not once. Not mentally. Not mechanically. Not emotionally. Every rep burst with intent, speed, and clarity. He didn't play like a rookie. He played like someone taking something that had been owed to him. And as his reps wrapped, players lining the sideline didn't look away. The buzz had become real. Shedeur Sanders wasn't showing potential. He was taking control. And the quarterback who had been ahead of him on the depth chart, the one drafted 2 rounds earlier, he was about to unravel right in front of everyone. While Shedeur Sanders was commanding the field like a veteran all-pro, Dylan Gabriel was watching it all crumble around him. He came in on the very next series with a chance to respond, his opportunity to show that this was still a battle, that the difference between him and Sanders was nuance, not a chasm. But it didn't go like that. According to multiple sources at the practice, Gabriel's first series, his chance to stop the bleeding felt more like panic than poise. And within one set of downs, you could see it, not just in the throws, but in how he moved. The footwork slowed, the reads froze, the decisions came late, and the rhythm? Gone. His first pass skipped dirt, a low, uncatchable checkdown that didn't even give the running back a chance to adjust. The next play, he hesitated on a slant for half a second too long, letting the defender close the window. And on the third snap, a delay of game. Not because the play call was complex, but because Gabriel forgot to reset the formation. That was the moment when body language started speaking louder than words. Receivers walked back to the huddle without eye contact. Offensive linemen looked toward the sideline instead of the quarterback. You didn't need a depth chart to see what was happening. And then, things got worse. During the red zone period, the part of practice scripted to test decision-making under pressure, Gabriel lined up on the 15-yard line with a chance to redeem the shaky series. Instead, he delivered the moment that flipped the building. On a routine levels concept to the left sideline, he stared down his receiver, locked eyes, and fired right into coverage. The ball was intercepted. Not contested. Not tipped. Straight to the defensive back like it was meant for him. Sources say several offensive assistants audibly groaned. One coach grabbed his headset and muttered something before turning away completely. And in the huddle, the receivers just stood still, motionless. One even shook his head, refusing to come back for the next rep. Nobody said a word, because they didn't have to. The silence around Gabriel became the loudest thing in that entire facility. And understand, this wasn't just a missed throw, it was a turning point. He wasn't just out of sync, he was losing the room. By the time he returned for another set of reps later in practice, the damage had already been done. One source close to the team said, "You could feel it." The guys didn't believe anymore. Not in the system, not in the mechanics, not in the coaching. They didn't believe in him. Even Gabriel's attempts to rally hand claps, calls for energy, sideline chatter came across forced and desperate. Because when players aren't behind you, you can't fake that leadership. Late in the practice, as Gabriel re-entered a no-huddle situation, the field felt flat again. He missed a shallow cross badly. Then came a busted screenplay where timing fell apart entirely. By the time they lined up for fourth down, nobody looked ready. Nobody looked connected. And on the very next snap, Gabriel dropped back, hesitated, pump-faked, and got crushed by a clean inside stunt from a backup defensive lineman. No one picked him up. No teammates helped him off the turf, no pats on the shoulder, no "we got you next" play. When he finally stood up, the closest player to him? Shadur Sanders quietly watching from the opposite sideline, calm, composed. And from that point forward, the unspoken reality of the quarterback battle became impossible to deny. It wasn't about mechanics anymore, it was about belief. And Dylan Gabriel had just lost it. A quarterback competition doesn't end when the coach makes a decision. It ends when the players do. And on that field in Cleveland, sometime around the second team period, the decision had already been made long before any chart got updated or depth got shuffled. The Browns roster quietly, unmistakably started choosing sides. And they weren't choosing the third-round pick. Following Gabriel's disastrous reps, players began drifting. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough that everyone watching noticed. Receivers, who just 15 minutes earlier were jogging back into Gabriel's huddle, now found themselves walking closer to Shadur Sanders between drills. Linemen began loosening up around his grouping on the sideline. Running backs started lingering near his spot in the queue. It wasn't a protest, it was gravity. One team insider described it like this: "He didn't ask for the leadership role, they just gave it to him, like they were waiting for something or someone to believe in." And Sanders never acknowledged it verbally. No rally speeches, no pointed stares, just eye contact, crisp communication, and sharp execution on every rep. Then came the sequence that shifted everything, not just the sideline, but the entire facility. It was a hurry-up team drill. 15 plays, full speed, no coaching interruption. Simulated 2-minute drill to close practice, the part of every session that reveals who's really ready. Sanders stepped in, and what followed was a masterclass, not just in physical talent, but in control. Snap 1. Quick release on a slant perfect ball, first down. Snap 2. Hard count drew the linebackers, slipped a curl behind them, chained another gain. By snap 3, the offense was sprinting forward. The defense was trying to adjust, calling audibles too late. Snap 4. Designed rollout. Sanders hits the tight end in stride. Snap 5. Hard plant. Laser over the middle into a tight zone touchdown. 5 plays. No hesitation. Clean execution against the first-team defense. And once again, the sidelines erupted not with casual applause, but with belief. Receivers high-fived each other like it was Week 14. The offensive line sprinted downfield to celebrate in the end zone. Even backup DBs started nodding and tapping helmets in recognition of what they'd just witnessed. It didn't look like a preseason scrimmage. It looked like a team uniting behind its quarterback. But what happened next made the contrast even more undeniable. Gabriel stepped in, and the energy disappeared. Nah joking, nah chest bumps, nah belief. First snap, incomplete, timing off with the slot receiver. Second snap, stuffed run, but no audible check at the line. Third, confused route combo players shook their heads before the snap even finished. Then, on the fourth play, a busted rollout turned into a sack. No encouragement. No sideline keep going. Just quiet recognition that the drop-off was real. The transition wasn't just strategic, it was spiritual. It felt like walking through a tunnel and realizing the lights were dimmer on the other side. And even more telling, players stopped rotating fully during Gabriel's reps. Some began stretching off to the side. Others leaned on water coolers, helmets dangling from their hands. Asterisk, asterisk. The vibes were gone. The leadership felt absent. And everyone knew why. Asterisk, asterisk. Because when Shadur Sanders stepped under center, people engaged. They locked in. They responded. The offense became alive, dangerous, composed, competitive. But with Gabriel, it was just practice again. By the time that segment ended, no official decision had been made. But it didn't matter. The team had already made it for them. Every quarterback battle has a breaking point. Not the moment the coaches make it official, not the depth chart release, but the second, when one quarterback realizes he's losing not because of politics, but because everyone can see the separation with their own eyes. That moment came for Dylan Gabriel on the sideline. And it didn't go quietly. At this point, practice was winding down. Players were rotating through cool-down drills, and position coaches were reviewing clipboards. But the tension on the quarterback's sideline? It was almost unbearable. Shedeur Sanders stood alone, helmet off, locked in, calm. Around him, receivers lingered, nodding. Backup tight ends asked questions. Even offensive line depth guys were hanging near his space instead of rotating back to Gabriel's end of the bench. That's when Gabriel snapped. Multiple sources say he approached Sanders directly frustrated, animated, and visibly upset. This wasn't just about misreads anymore. It wasn't about reps. It was about control, respect, and status slipping away in real time. Players nearby say Gabriel confronted Sanders about hogging attention, about teammates ignoring the pecking order, and about the belief that he, the third-round pick, should be seen as the leader. But Shadur didn't bite. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't talk back. He didn't flex ego, and he didn't deny what was happening. Instead, witnesses say Sanders simply lifted his hand open palm and gestured calmly toward the practice field. No words, just a look and a subtle nod, as if that single gesture said everything. You saw it. They saw it. You know what this is. That was the moment that shut it all down. It wasn't cocky. It wasn't emotional. It was final, because there was no argument to make anymore. The reps had spoken. The players had locked in. The coaches had taken notes in silence for the last 2 hours, watching one quarterback outperform, outlead, and outclass the other in almost every measurable way. And Gabriel knew it. He stepped away, fists clenched. Coaches rushed in to de-escalate. A few players turned their backs, trying to give space to the tension. But according to multiple people present, assistants, facility staff, even low-level interns, the moment Sanders lifted his hand toward the field felt like a passing of the torch in real time. One team insider described it best. Dylan saw it slipping, and Shadur never said a word. He just played better. That hand motion wasn't disrespectful, it was cold truth. The kind that hits harder than anything verbal. Practice nearly stopped. Not officially, but emotionally, the energy flatlined. Position groups got quiet. The coaches huddled tighter than usual. Offensive coordinator didn't call a final formation drill, just dismissed the offense early and told them to hydrate. The silence that followed was heavy. Not awkward, definitive. In high-level football environments, emotions always catch up to performance. Everyone tries to be professional until the separation becomes too obvious to deny. And on that Wednesday afternoon in Berea, that line was crossed. The teammates who had spent weeks watching both quarterbacks grow had just seen one of them arrive. And the other unravel. The competition didn't end with a snap count or a big announcement. It ended with a look, a gesture, and the unshakable confidence of a quarterback who let his play do all the talking and found the locker room listening. From that moment on, there were no sides to choose. There was only truth to accept. No official depth chart was released that night. No comments were made by the coaching staff. No press conference bombshell. But anyone who knows the NFL knew exactly what they were looking at. Because when an entire quarterback room tilts in one afternoon from the staff, to the locker room, to the front office, there's no hiding it. And inside the Cleveland Browns facility, following that now infamous Wednesday practice, organizational panic began to creep in. Not vocal, not chaotic, but visible in the ways that matter. Head coach Kevin Stefanski was noticeably rattled when the media entered the complex post-practice. Usually measured, he avoided eye contact when questioned about offensive reps. When asked about the quarterback battle, he gave one of the shortest responses of his career. "We'll evaluate the film. A lot of good reps today." And then he walked. No breakdown, no praise, no clarification. Just a coach who realized that what happened on that field was bigger than any talking point. Inside the building, the chaos behind closed doors was more telling than anything public. Coordinators met late. Quarterback's coach cleared out his schedule for the next 48 hours. Player development staff began re-evaluating support plans. And the analytics team? They were already pulling comparative data on rookie QB debut timelines from the last 10 years, quietly gathering evidence to justify what everyone already understood. This was no longer a competition, it was a confirmation. And for the front office, the people who spent a third-round pick on Dylan Gabriel, it was a sudden, uncomfortable reckoning. This wasn't supposed to happen. Gabriel had been drafted with a 3-year developmental plan in mind. A slow, steady rise. Time to integrate. Room to grow. But now, that plan looked obsolete. Because Shadur Sanders wasn't just accelerating quickly, he was outpacing every projection they had on Gabriel. And worse, the players knew it. Veterans on the O-line stopped asking about rep assignments for practice. They already knew who they wanted back there. Receivers stopped lobbying for extra sets with Gabriel. Young rookies stopped huddling with him for communication reps. The air inside the building shifted. Suddenly, mentioning the quarterback battle in meetings felt performative, like everyone was reading a script they no longer believed in. One person with knowledge of personnel discussions described it bluntly. The gap was never supposed to get this wide, this fast. Gabriel had the draft pedigree, the playbook head start, the patience of the coaching staff, and none of that mattered once Shadur stepped on the field. And maybe most uncomfortable for the top brass? Ownership saw everything. The team owners who had reportedly backed Sanders' selection against internal pushback didn't need to say, "I told you so." Their quarterback just proved everything for them. On grass? Under pressure? In front of the entire franchise. So what happens now? That's where it gets complicated. The staff can't come out and contradict months of public support for Gabriel. The GM can't admit that the third-round pick isn't working out, not after just weeks in camp. And the coaches? They're left navigating between fairness and realism. Because fairness says the battle should continue through preseason. But realism? Realism says it's already over. Inside the facility, players aren't waiting for someone to make it official. The shift has already taken place. Respected veterans have already voiced their preference behind closed doors. Skill players have begun adjusting their chemistry building towards Sanders. The defense? They've acknowledged who gives them real competition in team sessions. No one's talking publicly because they don't have to. This wasn't a battle, it was a takeover. And now the only question left is whether the front office has the courage to back the quarterback everyone already knows is the guy. For Dylan Gabriel, the collapse wasn't just visible on the field, it was emotional, psychological, and now potentially professional. Because it wasn't just that he had a bad day, it's that he had the wrong bad day at the worst possible moment. The entire franchise was watching. And so were the agents, the media, the scouts, and most painfully, so were his teammates. Let's rewind the story. Gabriel was a third-round investment. That means expectations not for immediate stardom, but for eventual return. The Browns didn't draft him as a backup. They drafted him as a project they could develop into a starter, possibly even the future, once injuries or staff transitions shook things up. He had system experience. He was supposed to be NFL-ready in the classroom. He understood timing concepts, protection checks, pace control. But what the Browns didn't expect was someone faster, better, and more commanding walking through the door 2 rounds later. Someone who didn't need time to catch up because from the moment he got under center, he was already ahead. That's when the pressure on Gabriel became something he'd never faced before. Not in college, not at the combine, not even during draft prep. This was the weight of suddenly being the less trusted option, and the team knew it before the front office said a word. And now, Gabriel's camp knows what's happening too. According to reports from inside league circles, his agent has begun quietly monitoring trade scenarios, teams that need depth, coaches looking for developmental passers. With each rep Sanders takes with the first team, Gabriel's window to justify his own spot shrinks fast, and options are limited. Let's break down the brutal reality. Option 1, stay on the roster and accept a backup role. Respectable, but make no mistake, that would be a massive psychological hit just months after being touted as the next guy. Option 2, get traded. Best case scenario, new system, clean slate, and a reduced pressure environment to build quietly without the spotlight. Option 3, land on the practice squad. That one's tough. It means admitting a full fall from the initial vision and hoping for an injury or miracle to crack a 53-man roster later. Option 4, release. A nightmare for any rookie QB picked in the middle rounds, but very real if the Browns decide the roster spot is better used elsewhere. And despite the disappointment, it's not completely Gabriel's fault. He was following a plan they laid out for him. Play smart, don't force throws, manage the system. But while he was managing, Shadur was electrifying. While Gabriel was taking what the defense gave him, Sanders was creating offense out of thin air. And you can't coach that. You can't teach gravity. You either have it or you don't. And in Cleveland, the team has already felt who does. But this isn't the end for Gabriel, not yet. Talent doesn't disappear overnight, and there are still coaches in the building who believe in his upside. But what's changed is the timeline. The patience, the luxury of waiting. Because once a team realizes it might already have its guy, nobody waits anymore. And right now, Gabriel's future is hanging on every decision the Browns front office makes in the next 2 weeks. One wrong move, one preseason turnover, one headline too many, and the very thing his team envisioned for him on draft night could vanish before he ever takes a live NFL snap. One person close to the organization summarized it like this: he's not just losing the job, he's losing the safety net. There's no ground beneath him unless something changes fast. And in this league, the NFL doesn't wait for you to catch up. It moves on. For Shedeur Sanders, Wednesday wasn't a hot practice, it was an arrival. Not the someday kind, not the give him time kind. The moment where a guy with a famous last name walked into an NFL building and removed every excuse anyone had to doubt him. He didn't talk about it, he showed it. Coming out of college, the narrative followed him like a shadow. Big numbers, but could he run a pro offense? Great arm, but did he hold the ball too long? Smart kid, but how would he handle a complex defensive rotation at NFL speed? And that name brought its own storm. The attention, the expectations, the whispers about who wanted him and why. Wednesday answered all of it. Reports from inside the building say Sanders' command wasn't flashy, it was clinical. He identified rotations pre-snap, then confirmed them post-snap without blinking. He threw to spots before receivers even hit their brakes. He layered balls over linebackers and in front of safeties, the kind of touch that turns tight windows into completions, and completions into momentum. On one series, sources say he stared down a middle field closed look, held the safety with his eyes, and ripped a deep dig into a space that shouldn't have existed. On another, he checked protection at the line, slid the center left, and beat a nickel pressure with a quick hit-out that kept the drive alive. That's not luck. That's translation from college tape to pro speed in real time. And it wasn't just the arm, it was the feet, the base, the resets. When the first read wasn't there, he didn't drift. He hit the second window in rhythm or took the underneath with pace. No panic, no wasted motion. No hero ball. He was surgical, not reckless, and that's what quarterbacks who last look like on practice fields when the pads are on. Teammates felt it immediately, not because he yelled, not because he posed, because he made their jobs easier. Receivers got the ball early and in stride. Backs got it where they could turn upfield without losing a step. Linemen could set with confidence, knowing the ball timing was predictable. That's gravity. That's what real quarterbacks do. They turn a collection of parts into a machine. Even the little things gave him away. Between reps, he pulled a rookie wideout aside and tapped the landmark on the field with his toe, a 2-second note that fixed the very next route. He pointed at the mic, then glanced at the nickel like he'd seen that disguise 100 times. He clapped once in the huddle, said 2 words, and 11 guys stood taller. This is how veterans lead. And he isn't a veteran yet. For all the talk about arm strength and athleticism, the thing that resonated most was composure. One miscommunication in the flat, he didn't flail. He tapped his chest, nodded, and called the next play with the same steady cadence. That kind of emotional consistency is contagious. It tells the huddle, we're fine. It tells the sideline, we're in control. It tells the defense, your window is closing. Rumors around the league say evaluators have always liked Sanders' tools. What they wanted to see was anticipation and processing tighten against NFL speed. Wednesday, per multiple people present, checked both boxes. He wasn't guessing, he was predicting. And there's a difference. And here's the part that matters most in any NFL building. Respect can't be awarded from the top down. It has to be pulled from the bottom up. From the locker room. From the vets who have seen a dozen next guys come and go. From the coaching assistants who chart every rep and can spot real from hype. Those people, they didn't need a speech. They saw a quarterback who turned chaos into rhythm. They saw a guy who moved the chains in a 2-minute drill like he'd been running it for years. They saw a leader who looked calm when the other side of the competition looked crowded and loud. And for the front office, this is where the conversation shifts from can he to how fast do we build around him? The route trees you emphasize, the protection calls you lean on, the tempo you prefer. The entire install starts to bend around the quarterback you trust. That's not politics. That's football. Ownership, according to those familiar with the dynamics, didn't gloat. They didn't have to. The field had already handed out the verdict. None of this means the work is over. It means the standard just changed. With this kind of practice, you invite expectations. You invite film study from every defensive coordinator on your schedule. You invite pressure to repeat it not once, not twice, but every time you walk on grass. But that's the point. Wednesday didn't crown Shadur Sanders. It revealed him. The franchise didn't hear a speech. They felt a presence. And once a team feels that, it's hard to unfeel it. What comes next will test everyone, the coaching staff's honesty, the front office's courage, and Sanders' ability to turn a practice takeover into game day reality. And that leads to the only questions left. Do the Browns make it official now? Do they stretch the optics through preseason? And what happens to Dylan Gabriel if they do? The clock is already ticking. Not on a depth chart, on the locker room's patience. Inside Berea, the Browns have 2 choices, and both carry risk. They can acknowledge what everyone felt on the field and move decisively towards Shedeur Sanders as QB1. Or they can keep the optics of an open competition through preseason to protect relationships, preserve trade value, and avoid admitting they misread the room on draft night. The locker room doesn't care about optics, it cares about clarity. Privately, multiple people around the team believe the decision has effectively been made. Publicly, the staff is still rehearsing the line. We're evaluating the film. That gap between private truth and public messaging is where organizations either keep the ship steady or lose it. Announcing Sanders now would galvanize the offense and let the staff build the install around what he actually does best. It gives starters maximum reps with the quarterback they believe in. It accelerates timing, solidifies cadence, and turns practice into preparation instead of an audition. The cost? You risk alienating Gabriel, torpedoing his confidence, and depressing his trade market before he ever gets a chance to rebuild value in live action. Stretching the competition through preseason buys time, but at a price. Split reps dilute chemistry. The offense runs 2 versions of itself. Protection calls get messy. Receivers start relearning spacing for 2 different timing windows. And every day you delay, veterans feel like the season prep is being held hostage by politics. The likely path, according to people familiar with how these things work, is a 2-track plan. Open competition in public, decisive shift in private. That means Sanders quietly gets the lion's share of first-team snaps during the week 70 to 80%, while the messaging stays neutral. It means preseason Game 1 opens with a short, tightly scripted Sanders series to showcase command, followed by a longer Gabriel stretch against softer coverages to maintain his market. It means the staff can look fair while still preparing the team for reality. There's also a personnel calculus here. If you're going to move Gabriel, you don't do it after his worst day, is the last thing on tape. You give him clean concepts, familiar reads, and timing throws he can hit. You limit the chaos. You let him pile a few completions, then you let the phones ring. That's not manipulation. That's roster management in a league where every rep becomes currency. But this cannot become theater. Players can smell performative decision-making, and once they do, they tune out. The Browns can't afford that. Not with a defense built to win now and a division that punishes hesitation. The staff's job over the next 2 weeks is as much cultural as tactical. That starts with a closed-door conversation with the Leadership Council linemen, captains, veteran skill guys, where the message is simple. Performance sets the depth chart. Respect sets the tone. No whispers, no fractures. Support the room, compete hard, and keep the standard. For Gabriel, the humane play is clarity. Give him a plan, what his reps look like, where his opportunities live, and what the organization will do to advocate for his future if the path here narrows. Pair him with a position mentor. Trim the install to concepts he executes fast. If he rebounds, everyone wins. If he doesn't, he exits with dignity and tape that helps him land quickly. For Sanders, the next step is repetition. Not celebration, more first-team cadence, more protection adjustments at the line, more 2-minute mechanics with the actual starting receivers he'll lean on in September. You don't crown him with a press release. You crown him by giving him the responsibility that matches what the team already feels. Drive scripts, kill checks, full-speed red zone work against the ones. There's one more layer. Media and messaging. The worst thing Cleveland can do is contradict itself. If you say it's open, it has to look open on the field, even if the snap distribution is tilting. If you say it's decided, you must back it with reps immediately. Mixed messages fracture trust faster than any interception. So here's the tightrope. Keep the public line clean, keep the internal plan firm, and don't lose the people who actually win games for you, because the team has already chosen its quarterback. Now the organization has to prove it can choose too. And if they wait, if they stretch this for optics while the players roll their eyes, that's how you lose a season in August. Which brings us to the final truth everyone in the building is whispering, whether they say it or not. This isn't about who starts the first preseason game. It's about who the Cleveland Browns want to be the moment Week 1 kicks off. Teams don't forget afternoons like this. Not because of the stat line, because of the feeling. The snap-to-snap certainty that one quarterback elevated everyone around him and the other couldn't hold the room together. What happened on that practice field wasn't a rumor. It wasn't a whisper. It was a visible shift you could feel from the bleachers to the locker room. Coaches got quiet, veterans exchanged looks. And by the final period, the Browns weren't watching a competition anymore. They were watching a coronation they weren't ready to announce. That's the line you can't unsee. When the offense flows with one quarterback and grinds with the other, when the protection looks cleaner, the timing tighter, the energy higher with one guy in the huddle, you can talk about fairness, reps, and preseason protocol all you want. But the locker room has already processed the truth. And that truth is simple. Merit won. It didn't arrive with a headline. It arrived with ball placement, with cadence, with trust. The kind of trust that doesn't come from a contract or a draft slot. It comes from moving the chains 5 straight plays when everyone's tired, and the defense knows what's coming. That's why this moment matters beyond Cleveland. This isn't just a depth chart story. It's a test of what kind of organization the Browns want to be. Do they protect optics or do they reward performance? Do they cling to sunk costs? Or do they lean into the quarterback who just turned a scrimmage into a statement? None of this erases Dylan Gabriel's potential. He's a talented passer with a real future, whether that future unfolds in Cleveland or somewhere that gives him a cleaner runway. But timelines change when the room feels the answer sooner than the plan expected. And per multiple people around the team, that's what happened here. The plan bent to the present. So what happens next? If the reports are accurate, you'll see a careful rollout. Publicly, the line stays measured. We're evaluating. privately, the work tightens around Sanders: more first-team cadence, more scripted openers, more 2-minute drills with the starters. Gabriel gets supportive reps and clean concepts designed to rebuild value. A trade phone might ring, a bridge might be built, and the Browns will try to look calm while their reality races ahead of the press release. But there's a risk to waiting too long. Players don't live in interviews, they live in reps. If the field says one thing and the microphone says another, you lose the trust that took months to build. That's how August costs you October. There's also a risk to rushing. If you name Sanders now and the preseason brings a bump, you invite second guessing. But the truth is, this building already made its choice the second the offense came alive. You don't lead from fear, you lead from conviction. And that's the crux of it. Wednesday wasn't just a practice. It was a referendum on who this team becomes when the ball is snapped and the margins are thin. It was proof that the guy with fewer headlines can own the room with nothing but timing, precision, and unwavering calm. It was the day the Browns' future didn't wait for a committee. It walked out onto the field and introduced itself. Maybe the staff waits a week. Maybe they stretch it to preseason week 2 for optics. Maybe they even use the word competition a few more times. But the people who matter already know. The defense that had to chase perfect ball placement knows. The receivers who caught everything in stride know. The linemen who felt the ball out on time know. You can't unknow it. So here's the question Cleveland has to answer now. Are you the team that protects a plan? Or the team that backs a quarterback the locker room already trusts? Because one path buys time, the other builds a season. Drop your take. Should Cleveland make Sanders QB1 today or manage the optics through preseason? And how should they handle Gabriel's future if the room has already moved on? If you want every update as this story unfolds, from rep splits to preseason drives to any trade buzz around the league, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll be tracking the first-team snap counts, the play-calling tweaks, and the exact moment the Browns stop hinting and finally say it out loud. The field has spoken. Now we find out if the franchise has the courage to listen.